Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio. Happy New Year. This is a speed version of the Art Joy of Sharing live stream show from January 2nd, 2020. And the theme for this particular show was Embossibilities, how to use embossing powders, different techniques. Well, embossing in general, but I did it all with pretty much powders. To emboss means to make raised, and so there are lots and lots and lots and lots of ways to do this. You can use pressure either by using a die cutting machine or using a stylus to press the paper and make it raised. You could use molding paste or embossing paste to make raised areas. And then, of course, there's powders with heat. So I decided to work on some mixed media tags. These tags were cleanup paint tags. So some of them had a little bit of spray or something, and other ones had acrylic paint on them from when I was gel printing, and I just clean up extra paint off of the plate that didn't come up on the regular sheet. And so they already had color, and then before the show, I just glued a few things on there with some matte gel medium, little scraps of paper, stamps, things like that. Most of these things came off a recent cleanup that I did that a couple days ago. There was a vlog and I showed you a lot of happy mail and things. And some of those envelopes that people send me have really cute things on them, and I don't want to throw the envelope away before I take something off of it. So quite a few of these are actually off of envelopes. There's also some postage stamps. I like to use postage stamps in my collage. So the first thing that I did here on this tag is that I used a old gift card and I dipped it into my embossing ink. Embossing ink is just basically a pigment ink that's sticky. And the one that I'm using most in this particular video is Versamark, which is a clear ink. Then you don't need to worry about what color the ink is. It's clear. The only drawback to that is sometimes it makes it a little bit hard to see. But most of the time I just use that for embossing, because why have a color ink for every single embossing powder that you have? It's just not necessary. So I used a couple different colors. One of them was a verdigris blend and another one was called denim, a dark blue. And I embossed those grid-like lines that are imitating the grid that was already there from the paint underneath, and just kind of accenting it. The next thing I did was to make some puddles of this extra chunky clear powder. It's made by Ranger. It's just embossing powders come in different grades. There's a super fine, there's regular, and then there's kind of a chunky. And it's just the only difference is how long it's been blended in the blender, basically, to make it, fine or not. And I wanted to build up some puddles of clear powder that I could then make textural by stamping a rubber stamp into them. So that's what I did. And I did one on the bottom right and one on the side there on the upper left a little bit. And then I put some embossing ink on my stamp and stuck it into the embossing powder while it was still wet. And that could create an interesting texture. And then to color it, I used alcohol ink. Remember, alcohol ink is for anything that's non-porous, and an embossing powder, of course, is going to be non-porous. To just highlight the texture a little bit, I used some beeswax stuff called Inca Gold that has a little bit of shimmer in it, and I just rubbed it across that with my finger and highlighted the texture a little bit. So here's a close-up of that. You can see that the alcohol ink did color down into the insides of where the stamp impression is, and then it was highlighted by the shiny wax. I moved on to the next one. These are 5 that I prepared before the show, just gluing some stuff on them. This one had interesting edges of paint. Like sometimes you use a gel plate and you put acrylic paint all over it, and then you press your paper down and pull it up and there's edges. And on this particular tag, I just pulled up those wet edges, so I had like some going across and some going up and down. It's a really interesting looking tag just before I even put any collage on it. And then this kind of scribbly face is a stamp from Elizabeth St. Hilaire. She designed it. She's a really interesting artist that I follow, and I ordered one of her printed aprons, and she stamped that on the envelope. So of course I'm going to save it. I don't have the stamp, but it was really cool to have a piece of it that I could use. So then I used some color box ink, which is a pigment ink, in yellow, and I used some yellow embossing powder to make some stars on the tag. There was one section in the lower right that was yellow, and I felt like the yellow needed to be spread all around the tag, not just in that one spot. So I did that. Then another technique that I used was to take a little bit of that Versamark, that clear sticky ink, the re-inker of it, and use a brush and brush it on where I wanted to apply some different powders. And I added a darker pink and a lighter pink on the cheeks, darker pink in the hair on this little scribble figure. And then when I heat it, while it's still hot and molten, I used a scribble, what I call a scribble stick, which is it's a skewer. It's a bamboo skewer that I could scribble and give a little bit of texture. It kind of presses down into the hot melted embossing powder, and it lets me remove a little bit so that I can get some mark making on there. Then I felt that that pink now needed to be carried down to other parts of the composition, so I used that same brush and Versamark ink to spread a little bit of ink down there, put some of the darker pink color on it, and heated that up to bring that color down. And then I did the same thing with a little bamboo skewer. I just scribbled through it. It makes mark making. It's interesting. The texture is raised. It's shiny. So it's just something a little bit different for your mixed media that you might not think about. You don't always have to use inks and paints. You can use other things too. So then I wanted to add a little bit of copper. And I have this superfine copper. So I just use that brush to put a little bit of ink on some of the stars so that that fine copper would melt into the yellow. And I added a little bit of copper. The reason I did that is because there's some washi tape that I peeled off an envelope there that's a copper color, and I thought it'd be nice to add that color in as well. I'm using a pad of word stickers that was designed by Tim Holtz from Ranger, just to add a sentiment to each of my tags. People ask me, what do I do with these tags? You know, these tags, I often mail them to people because they fit perfectly in a business-sized envelope, like the long, narrow ones, and you can just use one stamp. And when somebody sends me Happy Mail or donates to my channel using my PayPal button, if I have their address, I will send them something. And I know for those of you who are waiting for your something, I'm several months behind, but I do plan to um, make that a priority here at the beginning of 2020 to get that mail out to everyone, the thank you notes and the little bits and pieces of art. Another thing you can do with them is you can use them as bookmarks, or you can give them as gifts for use of bookmarks. I think the ones with embossing powder on it, if you really wanted to get use as a bookmark, you might want to just take a coat of matte medium or gloss medium over the top and let it dry, just to make sure that when the bookmark is bent, that it won't, the embossing powder won't crack off and rub off. Just, as a precaution if you really want to use it in some way like that. Otherwise, I just think, they're fun for people to have to maybe put up on their refrigerator with a magnet or something like that. Just a little piece of art from your heart to give to somebody. So I do that. I also do have a tag book. Sometimes I exchange tags as a swap, and I will keep other people's in a little book that I made, like a little journal with pockets to keep them safe. And I have a few of them up on my bulletin board too in my studio. So it's just another shape that you can do that you can use to make a little bit of art for someone or for yourself. You can also make a tag book out of them by sticking them together or putting them on a ring. There's all kinds of things. They're very useful little things. So I am mounting. I always like to mount my tags and sometimes my ATCs on a piece of solid colored cardstock. I think it's nice to have a little border or frame around it. And also, if there was any mess on the other side, which often mine do have a mess on the other side, it covers it up. Then you can put your information on the back and sign it or whatever and send it off. So I've mounted these two on some cardstock and I have some different fibers to put through the top of the tag to make it look even a little bit more festive. And here is the one I started with at the beginning with the grid on it and the textured stuff. And then here's the second one I did. I just had mounted them at the same time. So on to the third one. This one has spray on it. I'm not sure why. I don't usually have extra spray, but maybe I was testing some spray. Anyway, these are just in a box, and I have, tags that have color on them, just like I have some journals that have color on the pages already to start with. So I'm using a stencil this time. This is a Stencil Girl stencil. It was designed by Carolyn Doobie, and I just laid the stencil. It's like a mask more than a stencil. I laid that over the tag, over my collage that I have on there. And then I'm going to use some green embossing powder to, I sponged over the top. Did I say that? I don't even know. Using that same clear ink, I sponged over the mask and then I've just mixed a little bit of gold in with that green in a little dish to make kind of a custom blend. And I'm putting that wherever that sponged ink is, and then it will cover, because embossing powder, like this particular one, is opaque, so it will cover where I've put it, and you will see the little shapes of the people that were masked out with what was ever underneath is showing. So that's just a fun thing to do. I also used a stamp with some circles on it to stamp up at the top so that I could add that same green and gold combo powder up at the top to keep the composition balanced by having the different colors all around. Because I think that's important. It looks better. So all I did was mix some green opaque powder with some gold. So it has like some little gold flecks in it. I think it's fun to do custom blends. You can blend them up. You can even put chunky and fine together. You can do all different types of things. I added a sticker, and then to make my little figures stand out a little bit, I decided to give them a highlight using my white Posca pen and a water brush to blend. And you'll see when you see the close-up photo that this really does make a difference. It makes those little figures stand out from the background a lot. They were sort of blending in a little bit. I wanted to make sure you saw them first when you looked. I also used my white Posca pen to add some white splatters because I like splatters too. And to give them something to stand on. I can't stand it when there's figures that are floating in air. It's just a pet peeve of mine. I don't like it. So this one has a little piece of washi tape on it that was from somebody's envelope that has a figure as well. So I kind of framed that with a little circle scrap of paper. That was when I had die cut a piece of paper. There was some scrap left. So it's kind of like a little circle frame. I decided to add a little bit of blue paint in a couple places just because the blue kind of got lost. I'm blending that with a wet baby wipe. So there's that one. Green and blue. This one, I almost didn't even want to do anything to it. I already liked it the way it was. I think this little sticker that came from an envelope is cute and funny. But I did have a little stamp that looks like a tag. And I thought, okay, I'm doing a tag. I'll add some tags to my tag So I'm using black pigment ink, black sticky ink, to just stamp this tag around a little bit. And then I'm going to use some black fine powder to emboss it. Sometimes, sometimes when you're stamping on something, the black that you're using just isn't quite black enough. And if that's the case, embossing is a great choice for that. It really does make a very strong, very dark line of with your stamping. So black's really great for that. That does happen to me sometimes. Be using like archival ink and it just doesn't seem black enough. I mean, you know, how dark can you get it? So then I also have a heart-shaped stamp, and I thought it would be kind of fun to put the heart-shaped stamp and emboss in white and then try the alcohol ink on top of that, because this is the first time I've ever put alcohol ink over embossing powder, but it definitely works. I knew it would work because alcohol inks for coloring things that are non-porous. And of course, melted plastic, which is what embossing powder is non-porous. So it worked great. The only thing was controlling it, since I didn't bother using any type of a small tool to apply it. I just used the tips of the bottles, which then made maybe a little bit too much come out. If I was really worried about it, I would have just used a brush instead to apply the alcohol ink. I wasn't particularly worried. So I used some orange red and some kind of a greenish teal color alcohol ink. These are the Marabou alcohol inks. And there's this one called Rainbow, which I adore. I could bathe in that stuff. That would not be good for me, but I could. It's so pretty. It's like iridescent sparkle. And I decided to, after I colored my little white hearts, to put that rainbow on there, and it looks really cool. At the very end, there'll be some even closer close-ups, and you might be able to see that rainbow sparkle. Is so pretty. I just love it. I'm going to have to buy another bottle of that shortly. So I'm going ahead and mounting, while that's drying, I'm mounting the one that I did right before using some tacky glue, mounting it on a piece of solid colored cardstock, and then trimming it and punching it and adding some blue sari ribbon and a green piece of satin ribbon to that one. Making sure. Then I added a little piece of gold cord as well. Tied it in a little bow. Now I'm doing some mark making and shading using a Stabilo graphite water soluble pencil. And I'm just adding the marks and then going back and blending them out with a water brush. Water brush is just a synthetic brush that has water inside of the handle so that you can just squeeze and the water comes onto the bristles. I love these things. It's one of my favorite tools. I also added some shadow under the little dog guy to make it look a little bit more dimensional. So that one gets mounted on a piece of teal cardstock and some ribbons added. I can't remember what color. Purple, maybe. No, this is the red one. Okay, red and turquoise. All right. Red and turquoise are a good combination sometimes. I don't do that combo very often. I usually put turquoise with pink. But red is great, and orange too. Although this one doesn't have orange. But anyway, adding some little ribbons to that. And then I have just one more that I had prepared, so I decided to finish it up as well. I don't know if you can see the rainbow sparkle on there very well, but maybe at the very, very end you might be able to see it in the close-ups. So this one, I had added some little scraps of paper. It basically just had red, kind of a reddish colored paint on it. And I had a envelope that had some interesting stuff on it that I'd received from Carlotta Holman when she sent me some ATCs in a swap. And I added some paper. I added this little tissue fish that I had from APG Jamie. And then I added a scrap of burlap. And The fish in combination with the burlap reminded me of netting. And so I have this new stencil that came, I think it's from the Stencil Club for November of 2019. It was the small one that came with it, and it looks like netting. And so I sponged through it, and I used some hammered metal colored embossing powder. And then for the fish, I used some embossing. I used the brush, brushed on the ink, and used some embossing powder that's called heat and stick. And it just basically gets sticky when you heat it, and then you can put glitter over it, and the glitter will stick. So I used an iridescent glitter on the fish, and then I just finished up with some stickers and some of that same graphite pencil just to make the fish stand out a little bit more. So this one is kind of, I don't know, it has kind of a little bit of a darker meaning. I put the stickers, they say understanding free. And it's just been something it's a weird concept I've been thinking about lately, about freedom and whether we're free inside of our minds or not. So yeah, and it's because of the net and the fish, and it just brought up something that I've been thinking about. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please remember to give me a thumbs up. That's always important. If you have a comment or question, please leave it below. I've been very busy, but I will get back to you hopefully quickly now that I think things are calming down a little bit. And you can subscribe if you haven't already. We've passed 15,000 now, so that's pretty awesome. Never thought I would ever get that far. And I'm always excited when new people subscribe. So if you want to subscribe, you can turn on your notification bells so that you know when a fresh new video comes out. And another thing that's really great to do is to share this video by pinning it on Pinterest or sharing it on Facebook. Those things really help out my channel by allowing people that you think might be interested in my channel to find it, because there's a lot of content available on YouTube, and I'm always grateful when you recommend me to other people by doing those things. So for this one, I mounted it on some dark red cardstock and added some dark red fiber and then a little bit of black and white baker's twine, and this one is finished. So that's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.